And in 5.
You should be alert that I have a hearing loss and people ask questions.
I will speak up. We are live right now. Okay. I'm gonna just pop this in here. And this over there. Oh. Hi, I'm Eli, and you're watching Jewish Music Toronto. Welcome to a brand new show from Jewish Music Toronto. It's Live with the Cantors. This is JMT's first ever Patreon patron and sponsor supported show, and I'm grateful to you and them for making this show possible. This week's episode, so let me introduce this week's sponsor. This week's episode of Live with the Cantors is brought to you by Umami Sushi, Toronto's best kosher maki as rated by BlogTO. Whether you're ordering in person or by phone or through your favorite delivery app, Umami Sushi is ready to enhance your lunch, dinner, and Shabbat dining experience. Why not try two of my favorite maki rolls, the Dynamite and Dragon Rolls, which both feature salmon and spicy sauce. Click the link in the description to browse their menu and find your favorite roll. Umami Sushi, experience the fifth element of taste. Now I'm excited to introduce my guest for today. With degrees from the Hebrew Union College's School of Sacred Music and Temple University, and an honorary doctorate in music from Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion.
And the seminary, the Jewish Orthodox Seminary.
And the Jewish Orthodox Seminary. My guest is no stranger to song and academia. He is a lecturer and educator, has performed as a soloist in Tel Aviv's Mann Auditorium and New York's Carnegie Hall, and is the conductor of the musical director of Lachan, the Toronto Jewish Chamber Choir, and importantly, though not certainly finally, he has been the cantor at Toronto's Holy Blossom for 39 years, going on 40 years soon.
Yep.
Thank you for joining me today. Joining me today is Cantor Benjamin Maissner, though I know you prefer to be called Benny, so I will be calling you Benny throughout today's interview. Thank you for joining me today.
I'm glad to be here.
And also, thank you, especially, you informed me you're not feeling so great today, so especially
okay.
for coming
out. As long as
on.
I don't have to sing, it's okay.
All right, well, I won't push that on. By the way, in preparing for that introduction, there is no way that I could have included all of your various achievements and honors, because it's just, like, there is just so much. In fact, if you look to the right there, you'll notice a picture that we will probably be speaking about a little bit later. So you can feel free to comment. This is live, and if you have anything that you want to say, we'll be looking at that a little bit later. But for now, I'd like to get started by asking you about your youth and how you got started, because I could easily say it runs in the family. But you could have just as easily gone into pretty much any other field if you had decided to, but you went into cantorial work, so how and why did you decide to go on this path?
Oh, well, actually, I just did a workshop with the Kansas Assembly, a Yom Kippur, the journey towards the closing gates at Ne'ilah, and I described my feeling of how I function all these years. So the basic thing is, what is ingrained in me is the passion of a little shtibel, a Hasidic shtibel in Tel Aviv. One, the intellectual, unbelievable capacity of the one and only cantor who was one and only, and I don't think that anybody will ever be like him, is Leib Glanz. The third one is my dear uncle Israel Alter, who was the chief Oberkantor, or the chief cantor in Hanover, Germany. His pedagogical approach, because he was called to the Hebrew Union College to teach the arts of Chazanut, and of course my youth in this youth movement, Bnei Akiva, which was a community singing. We sang the entire service from the beginning to the end. And so these four elements have been ingrained in my DNA of how I became a cantor. Of course, in the little shtibel, I had an uncle, Mizrachnik, of course, a modern Orthodox person, as my family was and is, who was a great Baal Tfilah, a great Baal Tfilah. And of course, the statue of this great chief cantor, Israel Alter, who I wanted always to emulate his personality and his voice. He's a dramatic tenor, sang in Carnegie Hall, went through Europe with Moshe Kosevitsky, with the great cantors before the war. And so I always wanted to do that. I also played the violin, and there was a conflict between my continuing practicing and going into the field of a professional violinist or the singing. But I liked Mario Lanza and Benjamin Ogili, and Richard Tucker was a cantor. And so here I am, 39 years later in Holy Blossom, and I just finished my 50th anniversary of being a cantor in North America. But I started when I was 8 years old in Tel Aviv.
How do you start as a cantor at 8 years old?
Oh, very, very simple. As I told you, my parents were Orthodox, we were Shomer Shabbat, and davening in the little shtibel, I didn't go to a religious mamlachti dati to begin with. But in Kita Hey, in
grade 5,
grade 5, of course, I transferred to Bet Sefer Bilu, which is on the Rothschild Boulevard in Tel Aviv, and it had a boy choir. And one of my friends, that I just made a new friend when I came to this class, said, "Come to the choir." The old man who was training the choir was a great celebrity by the name of Chazan Shlomo Ravitz in Tel Aviv. His counterpart in Jerusalem was Rivlin. So there are two generations of great ballet tefillah who were studying and mentored by these two great. So Shlomo Ravitz was already in his late 70s or 80s when I was in the 5th grade, and I just went to the choir, and I became a chazan. Of course, I did inyanim shelo b'kedusha. That means you don't have to have a minyan like Kabbalat Shabbat, Psukat Dizimra. I was 8, 9, 10 years old. In fact, I have a recording of myself. After my bar mitzvah, I made my parents a present, and I went with a friend of mine who is the one and only Yossi Malovani, a chazan at the 5th Avenue Synagogue in New York. He was playing the piano. So he accompanied me on 2 cantorial pieces and the Mozart concerto violin at the age of 14.
So, with that in mind, actually, I do want to know, how many instruments do you actually play, if you're playing instruments now at all?
I play my vocal cords, and I play the violin. I haven't played for a long, long time. I start studying the viola, and I'm taking guitar lessons because I love to play folk songs and accompany myself. And so the sky is the limit.
The sky is the limit. Now, as I understand it, and as I said before, you're not just a cantor, you are also a lecturer and an educator. You've trained, as I understand it, at least 6, at least a half a dozen cantors here in Toronto.
Oh, yeah.
And some of whom, if not all of whom, I'm hoping to have on the show on later dates. And how many people have you trained to date? And what is the most interesting student you've had so far? Who is the most interesting student you've had so far?
Okay, I have a couple of students that, first of all, because I live in Toronto, and unfortunately there's no cantorial school or any university program that offers any Jewish studies, because to be in Cantor is not only to know how to daven and to know nusach, but most significant, of course, is the skill and the awareness and the knowledge of a chazan to know the nusach. So I've trained without mentioning the names, at least half a dozen cantors in the city, but mainly 3 of my students are occupying great positions. One is Michael Smolish in Detroit in Temple, Israel. The other one is Mo Glasman, who is now the cantor of Temple Emmanuel in New York, and David Rosen, who is at Westchester, Long Island, in a suburban, beautiful synagogue called Ami. These are the 3, but I have many other cantors in the city which are still functioning, and some of them already are not functioning as cantors, or they moved on in life.
Okay.
And of course, my expertise is in the nusach hatfilah, so that's what they study with me. But even when I teach nusach, I broaden the horizons of their understanding, the connection between the melodic line of a nusach and the words and the importance of the text, because cantorial music is not even like opera. It is very unique to the marriage between words and the music.
So I really should thank you again for taking the time to be here today, because I know May and June have been particularly busy months for you with Jewish Music Week, and then the Cantors Assembly National Convention, and you're leaving to Bulgaria tomorrow, Sofia, Bulgaria, if I remember correctly, to lead both the Holy Blossom Temple Singers and Lachan Chamber Choir at Varna International. Can you tell me a little bit about this year's show?
Oh, people ask me why I go to Bulgaria. Well, first of all, Varna is a very beautiful city in the Black Sea, and we are celebrating, my wife and I, our 50th anniversary, 5-0.
Mazal tov.
So she
Mazal
said,
tov.
let's go for a couple of days to Varna. Okay, Bulgaria. It is not globally known that Bulgaria saved 49,000 Jews during the Holocaust. There's a whole story about it, about the king, about the Nazis coming in and telling Bulgaria to make up their mind whether to join Germany or to join the Allies. Anyway, Bulgaria caved in and the Nazis came in, and they wanted the Jews. And it's a complicated story. The bishop, who was a friend of the rabbi, went to the parliament and said, if you want them, you have to take me. That's the story in a very short acronym. Bulgaria hid the entire Jewish community in the countryside, in the rural part of Bulgaria. So a good, I don't know, 7, 8, 10 years ago, a woman, an Israeli woman, Bulgarian of course, Sharon Technov, called me that they want to celebrate this and doing the Ernest Bloch Sacred Service with the Sofia Symphony and the big choir. They chose a colleague of mine and myself to be the soloist for the Bloch Sacred Service, which is a beautiful piece of music. We performed 2 performances in Sofia and Varna, and then in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, Petach Tikva and Jerusalem. And it was a great experience. A couple of months ago, a year ago, I got another invitation to come to do this time an oratorio called Melancholic Melody, which is written for 5 solo, Bulgarian choir, a children's choir, a mixed choir, SAT, Vito, a soprano, alto, tenor, bass, and the entire Sofia Symphony Orchestra, which is about 90 people or something. So I asked my choir, and I didn't really know that they would want to go because they had to pay their own expenses. But a good number of choir people wanted to go, both my professional choir and my lachan and members of Temple Singers, and I insisted that we do our own concert. So July the 3rd, at my anniversary actually, we're doing a concert in the synagogue, which is a beautiful synagogue in Sofia.
Your anniversary of your marriage, or your anniversary of working at
the anniversary of my marriage, July 3rd, 1968. So actually, we're doing a beautiful concert, which is very unique to our choir. Lachan doesn't sing just regular Jewish music. We concentrate on highly sophisticated music from the 12th century, which sounds like Gregorian chant, through the Renaissance, through the classical period, through the Romantic period, through the modern period of Canadian, American, and Israeli composers, plus Yiddish and Ladino and Hebrew songs and folk song. It's a show of about an hour, an hour and a half.
And this is
So
together with the temple singers and Lachan
that's
combined.
So we will be in the big oratorio with the Sophia Symphony, of course, but we will also do our own concert, a Jewish concert, which is splashed all over Sofia, and there are very few Jews there, but the general public would join.
I've seen now twice I think it was the Lachan choir perform the Roni Akara, if I remember correctly, and that was it was something like 5 to 8 minutes just of that small. You said it was a small piece of this. How long is that a piece in its entirety?
Roni Akara happens to be one of the most beautiful contemporary compositions by Paul Ben Chaim, who was a very famous musician in Germany, and of course made Aliyah in the 30s and 20s, and or later, I can't remember exactly when, but a very prolific composer. This cantata Roni Akara is of 3 movements. It's probably 7 or 8, 10 minutes, but Roni Akara, the first movement, is very contemporary, very vibrant, very energetic, and very impressive. And I'm quite impressed that you point out to this piece.
It's one that I particularly that caught my ear when hearing you guys perform. Yes, you do the contemporary pieces. Yes, you've done I'll call it the. I'm trying to say a word that includes 3, but I can't remember it right now. Tripartite of love and shalom, and Shir Shalom, and
well,
etc.
this is a folk song, of course.
Yes,
yes, Shir
thank
Shalom.
you. That was right out of my head right then. But when that particular piece, when I heard it, it's because it does reach back to something that normally I would think of. And possibly some other viewers, when they're watching this or thinking of Jewish music, don't necessarily think of these long orchestral pieces and long choral pieces that just go all over the map, as it were, especially because when we're talking about something like nusach, not everybody's coming from the same background. Me coming from an Orthodox background where pretty much I've only been in Orthodox shuls all my life, seeing something like that kind of cantorial work especially is
well, you point to a very important point, because at the Hebrew College and the seminary, the Jewish Theological Seminary and the Yeshiva University are 3, and of course the other training cantorial schools in California and the Academy of Jewish Religion, but the global awareness of a chazan is not only the nusach. Unfortunately, without pointing to which movement, we're talking about in pluralistic Judaism, nusach really went down the drain for many reasons, demographic and thing. I wouldn't go into it. So, chazanim to the young, especially the younger generation, are searching and including in their modern tefillot and modern compositions, regardless of where they function as chazanim, the authenticity of nusach. But to me, Jewish music is much wider than the narrow field of tefillah. And so that's why I said the Gregorian chant from the 12th century is a manuscript that was found in the Geniza in Cairo by Ovadia Hager, Obadiah the proselyte, who notated in his travel from Italy all the way through North Africa and into Iraq, or Babylonia, of course. And one of the big pieces that was transcribed by a professor of musicology, Dr. Israel Adler in the University of Hebrew University in Jerusalem translated and transposed it to modern notation so we can sing it. One of the pieces is very, very interesting. It's called Mi al Har Chorev. Who is on Mount Chorev? It's a eulogy to Moses. And it really sounds Mi al Har Chorev Amidi Man hachalti di da di da 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 di da. The answer Ke Moshe.
This is a responsive.
And this is the responsive piece that I divided it like this. Of course, it's a cappella because in the 12th century they didn't use any instrument, but a composer with them, Andrew Haidou, who's a very famous French Jewish composer, wrote a beautiful accompaniment. And so then you go to the 16th century, which is music like the Renaissance music, and the Jewish composer Salomon Rossi wrote incredibly, the first one who wrote choral music for the synagogue. And I can go on and on, but it's not a lecture now.
I might want to get a little bit more into the lectures, but because we're having this conversation now, I do want to bring up a conversation that I recently had with a friend of mine who is he's a young guy like me, and I recently had a conversation with him specifically about nusach, and we kind of got into this little thing about how he sees it and how I saw it. Then I was basically saying to him, from my perspective anyway, it was specifically about the way that the notation works, or the pace of davening works. But it seems that again, because of my background, I don't have that full understanding of it. Would you be kind enough, especially for some of our viewers out here who are of such different backgrounds, some not even particularly observant, to explain what nusach is and how it works?
Well, nusach, to begin with, has nothing to do with music. Nusach, you have nusach Sfarad, and nusach Ashkenaz, and nusach Ari. It is the juxtaposition of different text. If you open a prayer book, the Ashkenaz prayer book, of course, the Kedusha is different from the nusach Sfarad.
Yes.
So it is also Baruch She'amar, and different pieces in the liturgy, in the different nuschaot of the prayer book, have been placed in different places. I just did a lecture about Adon Olam and the Yigdal. So many machzorim and many sidurim have it in different places. Our common knowledge about it, it's at the beginning of the service, before Shacharit, Yigdal, and Adon Olam, but we sing it as a closing hymn. Nusach HaTfilah are melodic sequences that are attributed to specific occasions. So
that's more what we were talking about than nusach.
So here is, in very simple terms, there's Missinai tune, which are rhythmic sections, rhythmic section from the Middle Rhineland, from Western Europe, which is the Ashkenazic tradition. It's a whole subject about Missinai tune. Missinai tune were codified in the 14th century by Rabbi Molin, because assimilation was far greater between the 11th and 14th century than today. So he went from one synagogue to another, and so all the high holiday melodic sequences are called Missinai tune, as if they came from Mount Sinai. Then you have melodic sequences for each occasion. So the same text on Shabbat morning is supposed to be chanted differently than weekday. The same Ne'ilah, not exactly the same, but a sequence of Ne'ilah melodically came into Tal and Geshem. High Holiday Shacharit is also the same text, of course, of the High Holidays, but it's different than Musaf. And these melodies are based, and here's the complicated piece that non-musicians would not necessarily relate right away, on modes. Like in a church, lehavdil elef avdei avelot, like in a church, the different modes, we have modes of the synagogue. I'll give you an example. The modes that we call in Hebrew are based upon musical notation. So Hashem Malach is a mode which is according to one of the Psalms on Kabbalat Shabbat. And this is a major scale. Okay? But the seventh note is lowered, which means nothing to a non-musician. Okay? Chazan needs to know where this mode belongs in Tfilot. So I can tell you, it belongs on Kabbalat Shabbat, it belongs into Malchuyot, it belongs in Shafot. But the other mode...
Those second two being parts of the High Holiday service, and separate from the Shabbat service, which we were just discussing.
The other mode, which is a minor scale, which people say like the brachot of is Ahava, is not Ahava, no, I forget the name of it. Anyway, I'll come to it later. So the modes are notations and sequences of scales in which a cantor has to sing a specific prayer. It's in very simple, natural. There's a Mishaberach mode. Mishaberach mode is also Mishaberach mode is named after the prayer Mishaberach Avoteinu Avraham Yitzchak Yaakov, and so on and so forth. But that's a lecture on by itself, which is not for now. Nusach Tefillah is melodic sequences of different prayers at the right time. So when a Jew comes in on festival morning, Ha'el b'ta'atzumot uzecha is chanted different than on Shabbat.
It's considerably different. The one that I was taught, and I have to thank my brothers for helping me with this, because when I was learning it, it was particularly difficult. It was Ha'el b'ta'atzumot uzecha. Yeah.
Of course, of course. So you know nusach because you've been living like this, but you may not know which is what and which is what.
Well, because of the chazanut that I do from time to time, and at certain synagogues, I've kind of been forced to learn bits and pieces here and there. The only ones that I have not stepped into at this point are anything to do with the high holidays. I know bits and pieces here and there because of Kol Nidre, because of whatever I've learned growing up and just listened to and sung along with. But when it comes to actually attempting to even get into that, I get scared because of the stamina involved. And speaking with stamina, you've been doing this now for just as we spoke before, 39 years at Holy Blossom alone.
Yep.
And what inspires you to continue to do this year after year, and to continue lecturing now, to continue being an educator? What continues to inspire you to go on?
Well, because I'm bored of doing the same thing. So I always say to my choir that it's very dangerous to live inside my brains, because I'm always searching for new things. Of course, many of my tempo singers people do not read music. The professional, of course, and lachan people read music, but we have very sophisticated and high-class standards when it comes to music in the services altogether. And we have, in fact, on a high holiday, 2 choirs, because we have services in many locations, and the 2 main services with each of 8 or 10 voice professional choir. The second day of Rosh Hashanah, I have like 40-piece choir, combining all the choirs together, but I always look for new material. Besides the nusach, of course, which is the glue between the musical compositions or the choir responses, which makes it a very Jewish service. The compositions are from different eras, different composers, different geographical locations. I use a lot of Louis Lewandowski. Sulzer Lewandowski was the music director in the big synagogue in Germany, and Sulzer was the father of modern cantor, the chief cantor in Vienna, the second half of the 19th century. Both of them influenced so much that most of Ashkenazic melodic sequence in North America have come from, it became the backbones of synagogue music, written by these two major composers. But I always look for new things. In fact, already I have all my agenda set up for the high holidays, way back in April, May, June, to start rehearsing before the high holidays, very intense and long, about 8 rehearsals, each choir for 3 hours each. So it's a very, very hectic order.
Okay. We're going to, in just a couple of minutes, open the lines up, as it were, so you can tweet at us, or more easily, you can send a comment through the chat right now, through the live chat, and start asking any questions you have for Cantor Benjamin Maissner. But before we get to that, I do want to tell you about another sponsor for this week's show, which is the Jewish Music Toronto merchandise collection. In fact, I'm wearing my own Jewish Music Toronto shirt right now. And you can find Jewish Music Toronto merchandise at shop.spreadshirt.com or down in the description. I hope you'll check that out. So we're going to open up the lines right now. If you have a question, please do send it in via chat. You can also try to tweet us, but that is the easiest way to do it. And while we're waiting for some questions to come in, if we do have any coming in, because this is a new show and we don't know how many people are watching just yet, I do actually want to move on to some of the things that you've brought, because you have been kind enough not just to bring us one item, but you've brought us a whole stack of things. So can we take a look at the photograph that you've brought with us, with you today?
Well, this photograph...
And if you don't mind, I'm going to just put it forward here. Make sure that... There we go. Alright, I'm going to block myself, actually. So, there we go. Okay.
The photograph is a picture of the Dresden, Germany Symphony Orchestra and the Kreuz Choir, the choir of the Cross of the Church in Dresden, Germany. I think it was in the late 90s or so. They came and performed for the first time in a synagogue the oratorio Elijah by Mendelssohn. It was the first time of actually work that I've been involved because of my uncle, who was a chief cantor in Hanover before the war. He was their chief cantor from 1925 till 1935, and so in the mid-90s I started to get involved with reconciliation, if we can call it, and I've myself been in Hanover many, many times, but somebody sponsored this event of bringing the Dresden Symphony and the Children's Choir, which has produced many, many great opera singers over the years. It was one of many events that we did at Holy Blossom. In fact, I have a series of musical heritage concert series of 4 or 5 concerts every year. And the major concert, of course, is in collaboration with Jewish Music Toronto, with, of course, the very talented lady...
Jewish Music Week in Toronto.
I'm sorry.
This being Jewish Music Toronto, Jewish Music Week in Toronto being Elisa Spiro's event, in which I interviewed her a little while ago.
It's the eighth consecutive year that this festival is
amazing
incredible.
Festival, and I got to make it out to 3 of the events, including Cantor Eric Moses's celebration for his 18th year, was it?
18th year, yes.
18th year at Beth Shalom. I made it to the Malava Malka at Temple Sinai, which you were there doing Havdalah with Cantor Charles Osborne and Cantor Spyro.
Yeah.
And that was a load of fun. You had Lachan perform there as well as some others. And I also got to go to the last show which was with the Hoffman-Lemmisch Quartet, and that was phenomenal, just amazing jazz. I'm sorry, I interrupted you there. That was
No,
perfect.
one of the other things that I did, I don't have pictures, but you can go on YouTube, there is called Makalat HaShachar, which is a Japanese choir. A Japanese choir from a church whose motto is the Hebrew language. That choir goes to Israel many times. There are 200 churches in Japan. People don't know about it. Shinanomi Choir.
Elisa actually mentioned them.
Of course,
while
because
speaking with me.
the first Jewish Music Week, when she started it, was the Cantors Assembly Convention in Toronto, and I was lucky to bring
We've come
this.
full circle now.
Absolutely, I was lucky to bring this choir. There wasn't a dry eye in the auditorium, with about 300 cantors and a packed house. The credit, of course, is my dear friend and colleague Ben Steinberg, who is a great composer, was the music director of Holy Blossom, then became the music director of Temple Sinai, and he had made the connection with this choir. The conductor speaks a little English, but he speaks Japanese and Hebrew. He speaks like an Israeli because his wife studies Jewish studies in Jerusalem. I urge you to go on the website and look up this Shinanomi choir. So at Holy Blossom I was blessed with rabbinic leadership that always supported my dreams and my imagination and my initiatives, and I'm blessed with a great career.
So with that in mind, and you mentioned reconciliation with the Germans, I think that's the perfect time to show what you brought specially for us today. It's okay. Don't worry about it. You might have heard a bump. Don't worry about it. You brought something very special for us today. I will ask you for the special show and tell segment. Hey, what you got there?
Well, this is a cross of merit. It's called Verdienstkreuz, which is giving the highest award that is given to it. By the way, it's not a cross, because a Chabad rabbi told me that his uncle is wearing it the same. It's a cross of merit. It's a honor of merit, which is bestowed on the highest merit award of a non-citizen, of a non-German citizen, and it was signed by the president of Germany. The reason I received it is, as I said before, I was doing a lot of work in Hanover, singing many years in Kristallnacht, the night of the pogrom of the 9th and 10th of November, 50 years to liberation of Bergen-Belsen, and the initiative, of course, is, again, another thing which I want you to see. This person, his name is Andor Izak, who is the president of the Jewish Center for Music, Music Center, European Music Center in Hanover, and he actually has been doing all these gigantic choirs. I once sang at a hall which seats 3,000 people with a 400 people choir, a choir of 400 voices, and mainly singing, of course, the music that was so incredibly highly regarded in the synagogues in Hanover, in Germany, in Berlin, all through Germany and Austria, and of course El Malei Rachamim, and also I sang a piece called Moshe Lach Shloimalach, which is a piece that my uncle Israel Alter wrote, which is about the Polish little boys and girls who are no more there.
Now, this was during the ceremony itself, or?
Yeah, during the ceremony. So every year for many years, I've been going to Germany to do this kind of work, and the entire city is involved in it. Not only Jews. There are about 10,000 Jews now. Most of them are Russian, and so this Andor Izak is very, very highly regarded in the government of Hanover, and always invites the elite of leadership to these concerts. The villa, called Seligman Villa, that he bought back for about 6 million euros, it was a villa, a mansion of a banker who left in the early 30s when he started to feel that the atmosphere in Germany is not well. Of course, the Nazis took it after, and he became the conservator of music, and later he bought it back. It's a beautiful villa, incredibly artwork and woodwork, and he collects organs, instrumental organ,
not human organs,
yeah,
not human or animal organs,
which were the scene in liberal circles, of course, in Germany. So the reconciliation, not forgiveness. In fact, we put stumbling stones.
I was just about to ask you about that. My understanding is that as part of these proceedings, these commemorations, there was a stumbling stone placed in front of the, I don't know if I can call it ancestral home, but your parents' former home in Germany.
So in Hanover were my father's family, in a street, Langelauberstraße, and of course the Jewish community where my uncle Israel Alter and his family, which is my mother's side, puts on the stones are called Stolpersteiner, the stumbling stone. They are little copper elevated pieces of metal which are placed in the ground, and the name of the deceased or the name of the person who fled and the year that he left Germany or the year that he was murdered. And of course, in our case, there's an artist in, I think, Holland or in the Netherlands that is putting out those stolper stones, stumbling stones, but the city did it for us as a bonus of recognition. So in two places they put in stones for my grandparents and my parents, those that of course survived, because I'm here. So half of the family went in 1935 to South Africa, and my parents came to Israel, to Palestine, and got married there, and of course I was born there. And the same thing we did in Vienna, because my grandparents on my mother's side lived in a second district of where most of the Polish Jews who migrated in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and Franz Josef let many Jews from Poland migrate to Vienna. So we also know the day that they were taken out and deported to Minsk, and the day that it was shot in Minsk. And so it took a little bit longer to do it in Austria, because they are not as friendly as, I wouldn't say anti-Semitic, but as friendly as in Germany. So my whole family went to Vienna the year later, and we put the stones down there as well.
So with all of these different elements coming together, can you tell me about the significance of this, all of this for you? The reconciliation, the order of merit, and how this and the stumbling stones, how these things come together in a significant way for you.
Well, as I said to you before, the task or the role that cantors play in the world is not only to stand in the synagogue and chant or sing the services, but we're educators, we reach out. I've done a lot of interfaith activities too, concert with Muslims and Christians and Jews, both in the synagogue and some other places. It all comes together because I feel that the horizons of a cantor, and especially in my case of my horizon, is to spread the word of Judaism. If it's in music, or if it's in lectures, if it's in interactivity, mostly, of course, as the demographic changed, and later in years, the focus has to be on the younger generation. And luckily, in our synagogue, the rabbis are gearing a lot of energy into the younger generation, which I'm part of it. In fact, you never even asked me about my IDF and my romantic period in Israel growing up in the Bnei Akiva, and established the kibbutz Male Gilboa, which has a beautiful yeshiva now. which is really the most nostalgic and romantic, not romantic like between him and her, but romantic in my own life, of being in the Gilboa and seeing a barren mountain with just absolutely not one tree, because David HaMelech said, Al tal ve'al matar alechem harei Gilboa. There shouldn't be anything growing on the Gilboa, but we planted 150 trees every day for half a year. Of course, I was part of the Nachal. So that background also I bring to my congregation. It's reflective in my singing, in my understanding of the liturgy, in understanding of my own history, and imparting it to not only my 6 grandchildren, but to the younger generation. In our synagogue, of course, we have a confirmation class, which is a graduation of the 10th grade of the Hebrew school. So I always go in for a couple of sessions and describe to them my background, both musically and socially, as I grew up in, what kind of an environment I grew up. And so I don't call it reconciliation, but something has to be done to close the circle and move forward in life. And as a cantor, I think that I am striving to do the right thing.
Well, if that isn't a justification for me getting to meet all these cantors, starting with you, I don't know any better way to put that. This is why I want to have these conversations, because I get to hear these stories, and hopefully in the future we'll have the opportunity to meet again and do this once again. Before we do wrap up, though, I'd like to know what your plans for the future are, because I know you're nowhere near done yet.
That is probably the most haunting thing in my own life, because I love to teach. I love to teach cantors, I love to teach children. Bar mitzvah is a very big part of my life in the synagogue. But I've called my own, announced my own retirement. In 2 years, 2020, I'll be retiring. And I need to start thinking of what I'm going to do. Of course, I can play the guitar and I play the violin and I do all my stuff, but I really would have to teach. As I said, in Toronto, we don't have any schools or any program of that kind, but I hope that I will be able to go to both Israel and teach at the Hebrew College, but even in the Cantor Institute in Tel Aviv, which is really the most highly regarded cantorial school, led by very famous Chazan Naftali Hershtik. In fact, in November, I'm going to be part of the European Cantorial Association in Prague, the second time that I'm going to that convention, and help contribute some sessions and sing in concert. And I have to start thinking of creating my own website and putting all my lecture series and all my videos and all my concerts and offer what I have to offer, hopefully to impart what I contain within me to the younger generation. How it's done, I don't know.
That sounds absolutely wonderful. And who knows, maybe we'll figure something out to help that happen. That's all the time we have for today's Live with the Cantors. For this week, I have to thank you so much, Cantor Benjamin Maissner, for taking the time to come out.
Thank you for having me on your show.
I wish you a wonderful trip to Bulgaria, a happy anniversary, and I want to say a big thanks to my Patreon patrons and to the show's sponsors. The show would not be possible without you. Remember to check out the sponsors down in the description below. Tune in next Tuesday evening when we begin our regular show schedule. Heck, make it easy on yourself. Subscribe and click the notification bell so you don't miss a thing. Remember to join me on Patreon to take part in spreading knowledge of Jewish music and get more out of your JMT experience. Thank you to 81 Entertainment for technical assistance with the show, from commercials to music videos, corporate events, and more. Make your production everything it should be with 81 Entertainment. Learn more at 81entertainment.ca. That's all for now. Bye.